a long time ago because I cold, right? It used to always be smile, like when you take any picture. Recently, when I took it, they were told me not to smile, like deliberately don't smile. So not only do I look ugly with a frown on my face, so it's super awesome. But I guess if we all look that way, it makes it better, right? So we're together. So I do this exercise because if you're from a different country, you're almost always asked not to smile because that's what you're going to look like, specifically in your passport picture as you get off the plane. Most of us are not smiling after 15 hours on the plane, right? It's also a cultural thing. You're not super happy to get an identification thing. The other reason I do it this way, though, is not everyone feels confident in terms of writing or getting right into things. So if you ask them very easily to move themselves in, diversity is also about learning styles, right? So we're moving them into visual learning. It does have a question, but it's a 1 or 2 word question to begin with, right? The second one, again, sort of draws on that if you want to draw instead of describe. I try to choose countries also where they may not know where they are, right? So this also gives them some questions about diversity and where geographical locations are. I'm hoping they know where China is. Kuwait, maybe yes and no, Middle East. Nigeria, I just recently, my sister lives in Africa currently in Kenya, which by the way, I thought was next to Egypt. Apparently it's much farther down in the middle of Africa on the east. So not all of us are super familiar with it, even if we're do it. And I've also had students who have told me Africa is a country. And I'm not, I mean across the board, right? So I'm not pinpointing any particular type of student from socioeconomic class or race or whatever. So this gives them an idea that the world is not just the United States, okay? The other reason I do this is it actually works better if you give them pictures and ask them to choose which pictures the people would be wearing, right? Because for example, in China, most of them would look like me, right? If you have Japan, they would all look the same, whether or not they were women or men. And I'm making gross generalizations here, but at the same time, they're not our traditional ideologies that we believe in, right? So how would you ask an acquaintance to pass the salt?
Pass the salt, please.
Okay, would you pass the salt, please? Anything different?
Excuse me.
Excuse me, would you pass the salt?
I was always told you're supposed to ask for the salt and pepper together if you just won't.
Yeah.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
I've never heard that. Wow. You learn new things.
Not saying it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a very language specific thing.
Yeah.
So in the United States, we are actually, believe it or not, way more polite than what we would think of people in other countries. So if we say this in Spain, they're like, wow, she thinks she's speaking to the king, right? So they just say pass the salt. And often the reason I'm saying this one, right, we're now moving from ideologies, right, to communication. If we hear our Spanish-speaking students say pass the salt, we're like, or I need a meeting, which granted my American students say too. We find that rude and sort of non-accommodating, right? So this is making requests, right? So how do we make requests from informal situations, although I use an acquaintance here, to more formal if you're meeting? Because if you go on, the next one is how do you ask for an appointment with a professor in an email? Now, this might have become, with global citizenship, more uniform. Mine are usually stuff like, hey, I need to meet with you, period. Right, so this is as an EDHE teacher, something just you might want to teach your students in general, right? So I don't get particularly upset that they don't use my name and say dear. A lot of my colleagues do. I do get upset that they don't sign even their first name, because they don't usually send their Ole Miss email, right? So it's like, I like beer at gmail.com. I'm like, well, all of my students like beer, right? So composing an email. So this also, though, is going to bring up differences about how to communicate. And it helps you, in general, also teach freshmen how to communicate. I usually go by my first name, except with freshmen, because they think you're your BFF if you use your first name, right? So moving through this. And then the final one is how do you convince someone to do something for you? And that's where you're going to see the greatest difference. If you notice, this is also a role play, and we can also go back to hidden ideologies. I am an English teacher. and I teach other people to teach English. And if you go to that very last sentence, I expect spelled roll, R-O-L-O. So it is not eating a bread plate. Okay? It should be R-O-L-E. I don't do well with spelling or doing a check afterwards. So here, right, I wanted to show you an example. This is a pretty one that you can do in one class. It helps you sort of break down differences. It moves it so that if you start this way, you can talk about bigger picture issues, but in a more nuanced way, right? So if you think about what people look like, one of the student stories I tell is when Arizona first came out with if you look like an immigrant, they could stop and ask for your ID. My real hair color, when I'm not gray, is very dark, and I get super tan, and it was pulled out of line. Also because my name is Tamara Warhol, which again does not particularly sound Latina to me. In Arizona, it sounded weird and unusual, and I spent an hour missing my flight because I don't carry my passport with me to Arizona, right? And they thought I was an immigrant. So these are things where appearances make a difference. Now, and guys, I'm not saying that I have any minority problems normally. I'm clearly white, upper middle class. I super acknowledge my white privilege. Here was a very unique situation for me that at least for an hour, I recognized different things that are going on. And so when I tell that story, I try also to put that in perspective as well. But these gives us more nuanced things when we're looking at Nigeria, especially because they're foreign things, regardless of your race or gender, it's somewhere else a lot of times, at least for American students. If you have international students, you should acknowledge that. I'm going to move on so we all have a chance, but I'm happy to answer questions about this. I can answer questions about if you have questions, if you want some help with developing lesson plans or talking about global engagement or diversity. I have my cards for you later, and I have information about the Office of Global Engagement more generally. And all of these things, by the way, once they get excited about it, you can say, hey, now go study abroad, because you learn about them firsthand, right? So.
Thank you. Okay, up next is Kevin.
So I think what I'm going to talk about is going to build fairly well on top of hers. So one of the things that I have found is that sometimes it's good to distance the conversations from kind of modern things. So everyone wants to talk about Ferguson, things like that, but people aren't always prepared to, and they kind of get emotional about them. So one of the things that I have found based upon a book that I read in high school myself in Investigations in Geometry class, the name of the book is Flatland, and it was written in 1884 by Edwin Abbott. And it is a satirical critique of British society of the time. It's in the mode of, I think it's Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal kind of thing. Like you read it, you kind of know it's satire, but it has some very important lessons in it. And there's actually two main sections to the book. I will talk about the second section briefly at the end. But what I want to talk about is the first part of the book. And so to kind of give you an idea, Flatland is a world that only has two dimensions. And people's place in that society is based upon their shape. So to give you an idea, this is Flatland. Can any of you tell any of the shapes from the angle that you're at now of what's on here? So, for those of you who haven't taken geometry in a while, the way Flatland is laid out, so here's how the classes are done. The isosceles triangles, the sharper the angle, the smaller the angle, the lower down in society they are. And each generation adds a couple of degrees of angle. So these are your soldiers and your working class. The equilateral triangle is your merchant class. And then once you get to an equilateral triangle, each generation adds a side to it. So lawyers, and the higher you go in society, the more sides you have. Their priestly class are the people who have so many sides they're indistinguishable from a sphere or a circle because they had no freedom from a circle. Their idea of a God is a perfect circle, so which comes into play later. But all you're seeing are the men in flatland. Women are straight lines in flatland. So that's kind of the first lesson. First, women are straight lines. They have to announce themselves wherever they go in public, so they can't accidentally, what's the right word for it? Impale a man. Women have their own entrances to houses. So that is just some of the issues that are in there so far. You can't change your shape. I mean, like whatever class, and whatever class you're born into is where you stay your entire life. And women's class is based on who their father is. So if a square has a daughter, that's her place, and then she will basically marry a square. Or maybe one up her. She wouldn't marry a triangle, might get to marry a pentagon, but can't go much higher than that, kind of thing. So far we've talked about your place in society is determined by your birth, The other, your gender determined. Basically, it's a man's world, flatland is. And the last thing is, that I'm going to specifically point out is there's a chapter about people who are born with irregularities. So one of their sides is a little longer than others. Things like that. What happens to them is they're forced to conform to society's standards. And only those that are squares and higher. The other ones are either killed at birth or used for scientific experiments and then killed. And sorry, I'm trying to check my time. But so I get people talking about it and say, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about a society based upon this? And most of them don't like it, And then I kind of make it clear to them that that's kind of how British society was at the time. And then I asked them, well, what are some modern comparisons to that? What are some issues or topics that are related to that? There's another chapter that's on kind of one time in their history, people tried to paint their sides, and it messed up with the people at the top of the hierarchy's ability to tell what shape they were, and their shape determines their place in society. So the hierarchy banned body modification kind of thing. And that can lead into discussions of people who are discriminated against because they have, excessive tattoos or, piercings in places that aren't normal, With the gender, you can talk about, well, are women really treated equally in today's society? So it's like you get them talking about something distant and then pull them into more modern conversations with it. So that's kind of the core of mine. Do what?
Do you want us to pass these?
And the second part of the book, I really like. What happens in the second part of the book is that a sphere enters the plane of flatland and talks to a square and pulls him above the plane. And for the first time in his life, he can see his world from a completely different perspective. And what I tell my students is, after they read that and realize, kind of how his opinion of his world changed after viewing it from a different angle, is that is what college is all about. For the first time in their life, they're able to set aside everything they've been told, everything they know about their world, and look at it with a fresh perspective and really learn about their world through their own eyes for the first time. And at the end of 4, 5, or 6 years, they can decide what world they want to exist in when they leave the university. And that kind of helps challenge them to set aside what they think they know and look at their world around them, interact with people they wouldn't normally interact with. And the follow-up to this is a paper that I make them write called Leaving Flatland. The first page of it, they have to write up their world. They have to examine their socioeconomic status, their religious status, their gender, all this other stuff. their worldview, and then find someone who's significantly different than they are, interview them, and then write about their world experience as well. So.
You want to talk about the ISOM Center?
Sorry. We got ISOM Center. We have a dual mission of academics and administration, but a lot of our work is in the field of academics. A lot of brown bags related to issues of gender, sexuality, things like that. We teach classes, and like Dr. Warhol is actually one of our affiliates. We have affiliates across the university in several different departments that can kind of be experts for you on questions related to, you know, almost anything that you need help with, you know, so.
So there's a handout going around about the Center for Inclusion and Cross-Cultural Engagement. Many of you probably know we were established last fall, so we completed a year. Some of their programs and services that we have available for you all in terms of coming into your classroom, and so we will come in and help facilitate conversations. This year, this fall, for the first time, we'll have a peer diversity and inclusion, an inclusion and diversity education team. And so that is a group of students who can come in and who will be trained by our office to come into your classes. So that's a new service for this year. The team, they'll start taking requests probably mid-September, just to give us time to spend the first couple of weeks really preparing, because I want to make sure when they come that they're fully ready. We also do other programs, the Most Mentoring Program that pairs incoming students of color with an upperclassmen student. We have created the Emerge Black Male Initiative, so that's African American males enrolling, retaining, and graduating. This fall, for the first time, we will host a queer camp. And so that's a new program in partnership with Housing and the ISOM Center and Pride Network. And so that is a program for incoming students. Upperclassmen are also invited too, and to provide resources related to LGBTQ services, friendly places, and just to really establish a network earlier in their college career. In terms of offering programmatic things for extra credit, we host our Heritage Month celebrations, and we have a Are You Ready dialogue series. So just a variety of different programs that we can provide for you all. This fall, we'll also host for the first time in partnership with the ISOM Center Allies Training. So we've had Allies for faculty and staff. We're going to offer that training for students as well. So that's another opportunity for students. And so there's more information there, but our contact information is provided there. So if there's any, everything you need related to the center, just let me know, and we're happy to come in. So the activity that we're going to do is called Exploring Our Race and Diversity. And so I'm going to read aloud several statements, and I ask you that if you agree with any of those statements, that you self-identify by standing if you're able to stand, or raising your hand if you're unable to stand. And I want you to notice who is standing with you and who is not. And if you don't feel comfortable standing or identifying with any of the statements, simply remain silent. Some of you may already know things that are shared with them about others in the room. So I just ask that you respect their space and not bring attention to them. So don't out anyone here if you know things about them. I also ask that you respect others in the room by remaining silent throughout